Hello, everybody, and a very good day to you. Welcome to this event. My name is Andy Richardson from the Inter-Parliamentary Union's Centre for Innovation in Parliament. First, some housekeeping. We do have interpretation today in English and Spanish, so please select the language that you wish to listen to. And we are recording this session, and we'll post the recording on IPU's YouTube channel very shortly afterwards, most likely tomorrow. So today we are here for an exciting moment. It's to launch the guidelines for AI in parliaments and the use cases for AI in parliaments. I'm putting links in the chat, and we will explore these documents together today. I should note that currently the documents are available in English and French, and we will be adding Spanish translation in the near future as soon as we can arrange that. What I want to emphasize is that this piece of work, the guidelines for AI in parliaments, is an excellent example of an interparliamentary cooperation. We've benefited from parliamentary experts in 12 different countries, many of whom are here today to participate in this launch event, and to whom I express my thanks and the IPU's thanks. So with this, I'm going to hand over to my IPU colleague, Andy Williamson. He's the senior researcher at the Centre for Innovation in Parliament, and he's going to facilitate today's session. We hope this will both introduce you to the guidelines and the use cases, but also offer a space to discuss how you are using AI in your parliaments around the world. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Good afternoon or good morning, if it still is where you are. It's really nice to have you all with us for this second webinar launching the guidelines for AI in parliaments and the use cases for AI in parliaments. This, as Andy said, has been a collaborative effort. These are guidelines that are written for parliaments, by parliaments, and the use cases are real examples that parliaments have shared with us. And the idea of this is that we can support each other to do AI better, and it's an emerging, evolving world, and we're all at different stages on the journey. And I hope what you see today and what you read when you see the guidelines is a roadmap that you can take for building AI into your parliament and taking whatever approach you want to take. So the idea is that you can use these guidelines to map your own journey, because everyone's at a different place, a different level of maturity, and has a different ambition. And this is the great thing about it. So we're going to work together, but we're going to do things our own way. And what we're also very keen on is that you share that journey with us. So you tell us how it's working for you. You share your ideas with us. And particularly, we're going to encourage you to share use cases. But more immediately today, I'm going to ask you if you have questions. The format for today is the first part of the session. We've got some introduction to the guidelines and the use cases and some overviews and background. So a bit of presentation, but the second half is very much your half. So I encourage you to put questions and comments in the chat. I'm going to draw on some of the co-authors of the guidelines who are in the room with us, but I'm also going to draw on you to ask questions, and we'll try and get a discussion going. And we had a really interesting conversation this morning, so I think this is a chance to have that big conversation about what does AI mean. And I think there's a framing question that I want to have all of you think about as we go through today, which is, how is AI going to affect my parliament? What does it mean for us? And that's just something to have at the back of your mind while we're going through today. So I'm going to start by introducing Martin Chungong, who's the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, who is going to give us an introduction and talk about the importance of the guidelines and why they matter.
Dear colleagues, we stand at a pivotal moment in parliamentary history. The emergence of artificial intelligence isn't just another technological advancement, it represents a fundamental transformation in how parliaments work and how they serve their citizens. Today, I am proud to present the IPU's guidelines for AI in parliaments. These guidelines are the product of extensive collaboration bringing together expertise from parliaments worldwide through our Center for Innovation in Parliament. I want to particularly acknowledge the leadership of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil and the European Parliament, whose Parliamentary Data Science Hub and IT Governance Hub have been instrumental in developing this resource. The timing couldn't be more crucial. We have seen how rapidly artificial intelligence is evolving, particularly with the emergence of generative AI since late 2022. This pace of change brings both extraordinary opportunities and significant challenges for our institutions of democracy. As the IPU's recent issue brief highlights, we must take a measured, risk-based approach to artificial intelligence adoption, ensuring that human oversight remains central to our parliamentary processes. These guidelines build upon the IPU's broader work in supporting digital transformation in parliaments. The recent IPU resolution on artificial intelligence impact on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law emphasizes the critical importance of ensuring its responsible deployment, particularly in protecting our most vulnerable citizens. The work done by our Center for Innovation in Parliament has shed light on how technology is reshaping parliamentary work. The guidelines provide a comprehensive framework for parliaments at all stages of their AI journey. Whether you are just beginning to explore AI's potential or already implementing advanced applications, you will find practical guidance on governance, ethics, and risk management. Most importantly, they make it clear that artificial intelligence should enhance rather than replace human capability in democratic decision-making. I call upon all parliaments to embrace these guidelines, adapt them to their unique context, and share their experiences with the global parliamentary community. The IPU Center for Innovation in Parliament is on hand to support you in this journey. By working together, sharing knowledge, and learning from each other, we can ensure that AI strengthens our institutions of democracy while upholding our fundamental values. The future of parliamentary democracy in the digital age depends on the choices we make today. Let us move forward with wisdom, purpose, and a commitment to innovation that serves all our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And I think those are important words. That this is a big event. The introduction of AI into our parliaments is a significant transformation of the way that parliaments will work. And we've seen a journey of digital transformation evolving over the last few years. And with the start of the World e-Parliament report in 2008 to the latest edition in 2024, we've seen a significant shift from operational to strategic, and how technology has become embedded at the heart of parliaments, not a peripheral tool for word processing. And AI takes us a stage further. It's embedding itself even more into the processes, the heart of Parliament. And because of that, there are a lot of things that we need to do, and we need to do right. So we need the strategic thinking, we need the governance, but we also need the ethical and responsible approach, and we need to see how humans fit in this, and more so in parliaments than anywhere else. Because if we think about the challenges that we face in terms of public trust in political processes, now more than ever is not the time to introduce a technology that risks that trust. So we have to think about this from a number of positions, and one of them is trust, the other is effectiveness and efficiency, but above all it's about having control and reliability. So trust internally, but trust externally. And in terms excuse me, in terms of the guidelines, as Martin alluded, this has been a project that has been very much collaborative, and I want to thank the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, and particularly Patricia Almeida, and of course Ludovic Delepine from the European Parliament for their leadership in making these guidelines happen. They've been co-created, starting with a meeting in Brazil in April, and from there, today, we have a set of published guidelines. So it's a remarkable achievement in a fairly short period of time, and there is more to come. We will have some extra guidelines to release soon. And I'm going to get Patricia to introduce and give you an overview of the guidelines, but even though she's here live, because we have to do this twice today, we have a video of Patricia talking about the key aspects of the guidelines.
Greetings, everyone. I am Patricia Almeida from Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, coordinator of the Parliamentary Data Science Hub. In our last meeting in Brasilia, the first finding in our discussions was that implementing good practices for a responsible use of AI requires actions distributed in many levels of the Parliament hierarchy, joining the IT and the business units. Thinking in this challenge, we elaborated a set of guidelines for artificial intelligence in parliaments to be implemented incrementally, according to each parliament reality. Just for instance, for high-level decision makers, there is a guideline with a set of actions towards AI governance. There, you will find what is an AI strategy, how to implement it, what is expected to be written in an AI policy, how to establish an AI governance process, and how stakeholders' engagement is crucial for all those strategic actions. But you will also find a guideline showing some steps to define an AI project portfolio, a wide explanation about how risks of inadequate use of AI can impact parliaments and citizens, and how to mitigate those risks using some AI risk assessments, and in the whole AI system lifecycle. But still regarding risks, you will know how to identify biases in the working processes, in the data, or even in the AI system development. And a special attention was given to AI ethical principles to guide practices, processes, and the AI policy. Some of the recommendations can be applied to all AI systems, but others focus specifically on generative AI. And in the AI system development management guideline, you will know each phase of an AI system lifecycle in a very, very simple approach to make clear what makes difference for producing reliable AI systems. The dependence of AI on data imposes a guideline for data governance to guarantee high quality of data and personal data protection. And talking about data protection, a guideline for AI system security will make you aware regarding new threats that appeared exclusively for AI systems. And focusing on the people, strategies for training the parliament's staff and the members of parliament in data literacy and AI literacy were carefully elaborated. I recommend you to take a look at them. Well, we intended to make you realize that it is possible to adapt the processes and practices and make your parliament AI readiness. I invite you to read all guidelines and join us in a set of webinars that will explore deeply each one of them. I hope see you there, and please give us feedback for improvements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. That's a really great overview of the guidelines. And as Patricia mentioned, we're going to host some webinars in the new year, taking a detailed look at some of the individual guidelines so we can focus on individual topics and really drill down into those in some detail. So we'll keep you posted about when those are happening. I also want to talk for a moment about the use cases, because the guidelines are fantastic. They help us build the framework in our parliaments for how we do AI, how we use it, how we think about it, how we implement it. But what do we do with AI? It's a big open question. There's an awful lot we could do with it. And one of the things we decided to do as part of this project was curate a set of real use cases that parliaments had developed themselves to think about AI. So if you go through and look at the AI use cases, we've now got 65 from 10 different parliaments, and they cover a whole range of areas, from the legislative process and legislative drafting through to transcription and translation, which is the area where at the moment AI is being used most. And we saw in the World e-Parliament report that 20% of parliaments are already using AI in some capacity around translation and transcription. And then they go through to cybersecurity and public engagement. So they cover a whole range of areas. And one thing we would really encourage is for you, if you're developing AI applications, to think about submitting a use case. We've got a very simple template. Most of them are no more than 2 pages. And the idea of a use case is it describes how the system should work. It's not a case study. It doesn't need an in-depth review. It's just a set of information about what should happen. So it can also be a bit theoretical. And we'd encourage you to look at these use cases when you're developing or thinking about developing AI applications yourself, to see how others are doing it. It raises questions, it highlights challenges, and it gives you some sense of direction that you can take if you're not sure. So it's a good way to learn from the experiences of other parliaments if you're at the level where you're thinking of implementing AI. But also if you're trying to explain to senior leadership in Parliament why you could use AI to do something and how it could work. The use cases are a good way to be able to say, this is what's happening in other parliaments, and it lowers the risk. We can understand how others are working. So it's partly a risk management strategy, as well as an information sharing strategy. So we encourage you really to look at the use cases and share your own. And what do the use cases mean? Well, we've got a nice little video for you now that the Chamber of Deputies of Chile made about the actual systems that they're talking about in the use cases that we share. And it's nice to have Esteban from the Chamber with us today, and we may call on him later in the second part to talk about some of those projects. But I want to share with you now this short video, and you'll find the videos we share in the webinar are shortened versions, and the full-length versions will all be on YouTube, and we'll give you the links to those later.
En la Cámara de Diputadas y Diputados de Chile, la inteligencia artificial es una herramienta fundamental para transformar la gestión legislativa. El proyecto Caminar, impulsado por la Secretaría General, es estratégico y tiene como objetivo optimizar procesos internos, incrementar la transparencia y acercar la tecnología al servicio de la ciudadanía. Caminar comenzó con el desarrollo de una plataforma de transcripción automática que recogió el potencial de redes neuronales avanzadas, en particular la tecnología Fast Whisper de OpenAI, sistema que permite transcribir en tiempo real los discursos de las sesiones parlamentarias, lo que facilita la revisión de la oficina de redacción y asegura una mayor precisión y rapidez en la generación de actas y documentos oficiales. Con esto, se reducen los tiempos de procesamiento y mejora la calidad de la documentación legislativa. En la etapa de evaluación de modelos de lenguaje, se estudiaron alternativas como Anthropic y Cloud, pero finalmente se optó por la tecnología de OpenAI, debido a sus capacidades avanzadas. Con esta base, se desarrolló una plataforma denominada Asistente de Leyes y Normas de la República, que permite vectorizar datos y utilizar aplicaciones que brindan soporte en la generación de proyectos de ley y consultas sobre normas legales. Asistente que no solo ofrece información legislativa, sino que también incluye un módulo argumentativo y de impacto regulatorio, ayudando a los parlamentarios a tomar decisiones mejor fundamentadas. En el marco de Caminar, también se implementó un sistema de reconocimiento facial. La plataforma agiliza la verificación de la presencia e identidad de las y los legisladores y la revisión de material audiovisual. Así, se optimizan los procesos de registro y control. Además, se creó un asistente especializado para consultas de gastos de asignaciones parlamentarias, que permite verificar la situación financiera y los gastos operacionales de cada diputado de manera rápida y eficiente. Otro avance clave es la creación de un asistente para proyectos de ley basado en lenguaje natural, el cual permite recabar información sobre los proyectos en tramitación, sus autores, su estado y un resumen detallado. La accesibilidad de esta herramienta se optimizó a través de consultas vía WhatsApp, lo que facilita su uso en dispositivos móviles y fuera del recinto legislativo. Con miras al futuro, Caminar, la herramienta de inteligencia artificial de la Cámara de Diputadas y Diputados de Chile, proyecta desarrollar un asistente para el análisis de fallos del Tribunal Constitucional, empleando técnicas de vectorización y aplicaciones de OpenAI. Asistente que servirá de apoyo a la interpretación de decisiones judiciales y permitirá un acceso más ágil a la información legal y una mejor comprensión de los fallos relevantes. Por otra parte, se evalúa la creación de un chat corporativo basado en inteligencia artificial, orientado a facilitar el acceso a la información sobre la composición y el funcionamiento de la Cámara, iniciativa que busca acercar la institución a la ciudadanía mediante respuestas rápidas y precisas a las consultas sobre temas legislativos.
So there we can see some real examples of where AI is being used in an everyday sense, in a practical sense, in Chile, in the Chamber of Deputies, and it shows the key thing there is, I guess, efficiency, making Parliament more efficient transcription, more efficient drafting of legislation, and the ability to discover information, such as going through previous judicial and legislative texts, that actually for a human being to do is quite an onerous and lengthy process. For AI, it's a very simple process, but of course it always raises that question of, and is it right? So we have to have those checks and balances. And I think also a nice point in there that's made towards the end of the video is about strengthening public engagement. So they're not just tools for efficiency, but these are tools for strengthening Parliament's connection with the public. And there are some nice examples that we see in the use cases of public engagement tools, including being able to understand and analyze qualitative data, which is something that the current AI models are very, very good at. So what does this mean for the institution? Well, structurally, there's behind the scenes in what you see in Chile, as mentioned in the video, there's a need to integrate AI into the architecture of Parliament. So on top of the platforms we already have and the cloud that we need to make AI and other things work, particularly remote working, we're now layering AI around that as well. So there's a technical architecture presence there, but there's also a governance aspect of this. How do we manage the day-to-day use of AI, and how do we set rules and regulations in Parliament and decide on where we're going to experiment with AI and where we're not going to at this point, and what's that decision based on? Is it financial? Is it technical? Is it skill-based? Is it ethical? So we need to think about AI at the top level of Parliament. And I'm really delighted that we have the first Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Uzbekistan, Akmal Saidov, who's going to talk about AI in Parliament from that very strategic level.
Dear colleagues, today we begin an important journey by presenting the IPU guidelines on the use of artificial intelligence in parliaments. This is a significant step forward in helping legislators around the world to use the immense potential of artificial intelligence responsibly and effectively. Today I present new suggestions for the future of AI in Parliament. First, ensure algorithmic transparency. Second, protect human rights and prevent discrimination. Third, clarify legal responsibility for decisions made by AI. Fourth, establish ethics and regulatory committees. Fifth, promoting international cooperation. Sixth, enhancing digital education. Seventh, prioritize legal futurism. And AIDS breeds the digital divide. Thank you for your attention and commitment to this essential work.
And there's a longer version of that video available to you on the YouTube channel. And those are really key points that Mr. Saidov makes about transparency and openness, but also the need to think about, we can't just turn on AI. It raises a number of questions institutionally and individually. How do we use it? How do we gain the skills to use it? And if we think about digital literacy, we have another step to take in terms of understanding what AI is and how it works. So there's quite a few big issues there, and it's nice to have that endorsement for the guidelines, because I think, you know, we feel this is a timely and important product, and it's going to contribute significantly to the debate, but it's not something that's static. This is a very fast-moving field, and we feel it's important that this is a starting point to the conversation. It's not the end of it very much. So this debate today is a good place for us to start and ask the questions and air our concerns about what does AI mean for Parliament. And we're going to move on now to more of an open discussion phase, where I'm going to get you to ask questions. So as I said earlier, if you do have a question, you can raise your hand if you want to speak. If you just want to ask the question, please put it in the chat and we'll pick that up. We've a number of people here who can answer questions better than I can, because they've written some of the guidelines. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask you a question. So we're going to put up a very quick poll just for less than a minute and ask you to very quickly respond. There's no need to think too hard about this, but just answer with what you feel intuitively is right for your Parliament. So your Parliament is ready for AI. You can go from strongly disagreeing to strongly agreeing. A chance to vote now. You're voting quickly. That's good. Good to see. Excellent. We're just over 65%. So I'm going to get you the last ones to press the button, and we're going to stop it now, I think. That looks good. So, are you ready for AI? Hopefully you can all see the results of that. Yes and no. I think this is about what we expect. It's very similar to what we saw in the poll this morning. 9% strongly agree. Yes, you are ready for AI, and you strongly agree with that statement. And we saw 8% this morning, and that feels about right. You know, there's about that 10% of parliaments who are comfortable and using AI. And there's a good question there. Ready in what way? Well, I didn't say that because I didn't want to lead you in the answer. But yes, ready in what way? Are you ready technically? Are you ready in a governance, regulatory sense? Are you ready emotionally or culturally to take on AI? It's actually a big question, which is not one to go into today. But there's a lot of things to think about. And I think that 29% in there who are not ready, that's reflective as well. A lot of us are not, and we shouldn't see these AI guidelines as being aimed at one single parliament that's ready with all the technology. It's very much aimed at everybody at whatever level you are. And I'm going to ask my colleague in the European Parliament, Ludovic Delepine, to reflect on what this survey, very quick survey, says and how that relates to the guidelines. So Ludovic, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thanks for answering the poll. And it's true that the part of the parliaments answering that they agree or strongly agree is quite high and very similar to this morning. But I would like to focus on the one that mentioned disagree or strongly disagree, about 29% either. AI is mainly a matter of data, principally. If you have some data, you can do some AI. Then it's to better understand under which conditions you can use this data in order to augment some tasks that you will do. And this is something that I learned by running the IT Governance Hub with the CIP for many years right now, that from the very beginning, I had the idea that all the parliaments are different. And the argument behind was that we each of us have a rules of procedure. So each parliament or each chamber has its own rules of procedure. So in a way, we are different from the one to the others. But when we are talking about artificial intelligence, that's something completely different. We are not talking about the rules of the parliaments, but we have some methodologies which are introduced inside the guidelines that will bring the discussion to the tasks. Which kind of tasks can we augment? Under which condition, which kind of data, under which kind of regulation we have to comply. And when you look at these tasks, we have much more in common than we may think. In fact, we have a lot in common together. And this is a very positive point of these guidelines. This is what we discovered by exchanging with all the colleagues who participated. And this is what you can see through the different use cases that have been introduced. You have a group of parliaments that are really front leaders. You have Chile, you have Italy, you have the Bundestag. So you have a set of countries that decided to move extremely fast and for which you can see results and you can learn from that. You have another group of parliaments that want to learn. And I really recommend, for instance, the approach from Canada for those who are in this group. So trying to look at the front leaders, how they progress, what are the lessons learned, and try to take the best and implement from them in your parliament. And then you have other parliaments for which I think it's about what could be the use of AI in the parliament, so better understanding, but also a kind of demystification of artificial intelligence and a kind of deshumanization. There's no human in computers. Please, these are only algorithms. It's only about electronics. It can give a surprising result, but it's only electronics behind. So these are things that can be discussed and that pave the way that we work all together to establish these guidelines. So we have a lot in common. We have a lot to learn from each other, and it's not a question of resources. We can make artificial intelligence, whether it is generative AI or discriminative AI, with very few resources, with only staff, and also with very few financial resources. So it's not a question of resource. And this is also something that can be explained, that can be discussed, how this can be started up. It's not a matter of size. We had huge discussions about how to dematerialize a plenary, for instance, or committee rooms. And this requires huge investments because you need screens, because you need equipment. But when we are talking about AI, we are not talking about that scale. And this is something that we can exchange. This is something that we can talk all together. But these guidelines are only the beginning. Their success depends on the will of each parliament represented here. They call on us to build capacity for such collaboration and ensure the voices of all are heard in shaping AI policies. As we embrace this responsibility, I encourage us to view AI not just as a challenge to regulate, but as an opportunity to lead. By harnessing its potential with care and wisdom, we can create systems that strengthen trust in governance. The world will look at our actions as a model for balancing innovations with ethics. Let us rise this occasion, showing that when technology meets leadership guided by principles, it can become a force for good.
There's a group of leaders, there's a group of parliaments who are pushing ahead with AI. There's a lot of parliaments coming up behind who are thinking about it. And there are some questions that we are all going to have. I want to start with, at the top level, at the strategic level, I want to think about the strategic benefits. What are the main strategic benefits? And I want this next session to be more of you telling us what you think. So I'm going to ask Kim van Duren from the Senate of the Netherlands, Kim, if you're able, to just have a think for a moment about, for you, how can we ensure that we're implementing AI responsibly? What are the things that we need to think about in terms of governance? I'm putting you on the spot a bit, Kim. So if you're there and able to respond. Okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think I
Kim,
found
there. Okay, brilliant.
Okay, I'm
Sorry
there.
to put you on the spot. So yeah, go ahead. What do you think are the things we need to think about if we're going to be strategic and responsible about AI?
Well, if we want to think strategic and responsible, then we also have to consider the risks and biases and ethical principles while we are developing the AI in the parliaments. If I can give an example of, for instance, we receive a lot of mails and emails, letters from social society, from civilians. We have AI software using to make sensitive data invisible. So then at the same time, you don't want the names of the parliamentarians to be blotted out. And we also receive letters from the government, and they have information about contact details of civil servants who are working there, and their ministry is already blotting out their data and sending it to us. However, we found out some years ago, but maybe that's already repaired, but you have to be aware of those kind of risks. There was a link on our website where people who couldn't hear very well who couldn't see very well could have text read out. And it also read out the blotted data of the civil servants working at the ministry. So if you were looking at it, it wasn't visible, but if it was read out loud, then their names were disposed. So you have to be aware that in the system, have you really evaluated all the risks and how is everything working together? Because that's a big difference. A lot of systems are cooperating nowadays, and sometimes in one system there is a strict retention period with regard to sensitive data, and you are importing it in your own system, and what are you doing with those retention periods? So there are a lot of considerations when you are building and using your AI system in Parliament that you have to consider. So that's why we have developed also some chapters in the guidelines regarding risks and biases and ethical principles. And it's also very important to have maybe a committee, an ethical committee, or people discussing it, making sure that on all levels of the organization you take this into consideration. Also the people who are actually developing the IT systems, the AI systems, who are considering which data will be used. So you have to consider it, and on every level be aware of the ethical principles when you promote the use of AI systems in Parliament.
Mm. And in fact, Kim, the point you said there's a question in the chat from Trevor Clark saying, has AI the ability to strengthen data protection of systems? And in fact, the question is slightly reversed, because what you're saying there is actually AI is a risk in terms of data protection if we don't think about it. So that's quite a useful point. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask people who raise their hands when I select them to speak for no more than 1 minute, please, because we're going to run out of time at the top of the hour, and I want to get as many people in as possible. There's a question from the Shura Council in Bahrain, which is an interesting big picture strategic question, is what's the correct mechanism for measuring digital transformation? And I was thinking, well, this isn't to do with AI, but actually it is, because AI is part of our digital transformation process. And the answer, Dina, is we don't have a formal mechanism for measuring digital transformation. There are a number of factors that affect you locally. But it's one of the things that in SIP we're going to take a look at next year in terms of how we use. We've got the digital maturity index. Can we use that as a reference point? And it's certainly designed as a reference for parliaments to try and measure yourself in terms of your own progress, not necessarily against others. So in terms of AI, how do we introduce AI into the metric of digital transformation? I don't know. It'll be an interesting one. Patricia, you've got your hand raised, and because of that, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, really to talk about, perhaps if you could just say briefly, I'm sure you've got a point you want to make, but if you could do in a minute your point, and also just say why it's important to take a risk-based approach to introducing AI as well, because it's something that we emphasize in the guidelines. Patricia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. When we designed the AI guidelines, the first thing that we had in our mind is we need to make everything practical. So when we mentioned ethical principles, we tried to find in everything, in all process, along with the whole hierarchy, what is what matters for making things with responsibility. So it's not only defining an AI policy. Yes, it's good. It's very good. I would start with a very simple policy for Gen AI, for example. But not only this. When you define a strategy, when we define your, to start a project, we need to analyze what are the risks of using AI in such project. And when do this, we need to consider the ethical principles. Just for instance, privacy, if you have any classified information to be used by AI. For example, if you are using Gen AI, will you use classified information to the cloud? Secondly, biases. Biases sometimes things make us an impression that we are dealing only with differences between treatment with women and men, but not only this. For example, when we are dealing with the committees, if our data were the data that were used for training the systems were data only used for 1, 2, or 3 committees in the legislative process, the whole understanding, and if you have many other committees, the whole understanding will be biased with only the main words, the main expressions, the main findings of only those 3 that you considered. So biases in our guideline is something very tangible to be analyzed. Another example, oversight, human autonomy and oversight. What does it mean? Basically, it means that while you are developing the systems, you have to monitor everything and understand, analyze if there is hallucinations, if you find biases, but not only while you are developing. After the deployment, and especially after the deployment, we have to monitor those AI systems along with their whole life. Because especially after being in operation, systems over time, they lose their performance. We can see new data coming, and some of them change the original meaning, the original aim of our system. So ethical principles is not only a set of principles written in a policy. They are present in all processes and practices that we have designed to be used in different combinations. This was the meaning, Andy.
Thank you, Patricia. And that actually rather brilliantly answers a couple of the questions that we had in the chat. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask Professor Asmi Barawian to make an intervention in a second, as you've got your hand up, Professor. While he's just getting ready, if you have a question, pop it in the chat. If you want to say something, raise your hand, and I can call on you. We'll try and keep it brief. Professor Badawian, are you there? Are you able to? Okay.
مرحبا. أرحب بكم جميعا في هذه الحلقة العالمية تعتبر. أنا مداخلتي مداخلة مش حد مطول، لكن هو ينبغي أن نحدد شيئين. هو هل الذكاء الاصطناعي خيار أم ضرورة؟ أعتقد أنه هو الآن أصبح ضرورة وليس خيار، وإن لم يكن الآن فإنه سيتحول إلى أن يكون ضرورة. فبالتالي مواكبة التحول الرقمي على مستوى العالم، وإذا كنا نتكلم عن استراتيجيات، فينبغي على كافة البرلمانات أنها إن لم تسعى الآن فلعلها تكون قد تأخر بها الركب للوصول إلى أو للحاق بباقي المنظومة الدولية. من المعهود أن هناك في كل تقنية جديدة هناك تخوفات في كل التقنيات، سواء حتى في موضوع المحطات التلفزية عندما عرضت أول مرة والأطباق، هناك بعض الدول كانت تطلق الرصاص على أطباق استقبال المحطات يعني. فالتخوف هذا شيء معهود. نحن نسعى في الاستعمال الرقمنة أو الذكاء الاصطناعي إلى شيء اللي هو تحقيق الحوكمة أو الحكم الرشيد، الذي هو أول ما يعتمد على وصول الشفافية في الدولة، والثانية حقية المواطنين أو المجتمع أن يسائل الحكومات، وثالثا هو الارتقاء بالكفاءة إلى أعلى مستوياتها. إذن هل هو necessity or optional؟ أنا أعتقد أنه هو necessity، هو ضرورة الآن، أصبح ضرورة. النقطة الرئيسية في تكاثف النقاط الثلاثة اللي هي الشفافية والمساءلة والكفاءة، والهدف هو كفاءة بالارتقاء بالأداء إلى أعلى مستوياته، إلى أن تصل كفاءة إلى أعلى مستويات. فبالتالي الرقمنة هنا ضرورة. المعلومة ذكرت في الاستبيان أنا كلمة لفتت انتباهي، هي المصداقية. يعني هل عندما نطرح هناك معلومتان، هناك معلومة مرصودة اللي هي ترصد عن طريق الاستبيانات وكذا من خلال، وهناك معلومة مقدمة من الدول. قد لا تكون المعلومة المقدمة من الدول حقيقية بقدر ما تكون المعلومة المرصودة من المجتمعات هي الأكثر حقيقة. فبالتالي موضوع الرقمنة الآن يضع الدول أو البرلمانات في مواجهة في مرآة مع أنفسها مدى مصداقيتها في التقدم بدولها، مدى مصداقيتها في تطبيق الحوكمة أو الحكم الرشيد، مدى مصداقيتها في السعي لتحقيق الديمقراطية وارتفاع مستوى العدالة وحقوق الإنسان وباقي هذه المنظومة التي ترتقي بكل دولة. كانت هذه مداخلتي باختصار شديد، لكن أعود وأقول أن المصداقية مهمة جدا، الكفاءة والحوكمة كما قلنا اللي هي الشفافية والمساءلة والكفاءة، والشيء الثالث المصداقية، وأنهي بأنها أصبحت ضرورة وليست خيار. ولكم الشكر. استمر صور الرد بتاعنا.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, those are really good points. Thank you very much. And I think the thing about credibility, we've got to be able to trust these systems, and it's important everywhere, but it's even more important when we're talking about Parliament and public trust. And we've seen in so many countries the volatility of public trust at the moment. We need to be cautious in our approach to AI. And that leads me on, Giovanni Giccone. Can I bring in the Italian Chamber of Deputies in the work you're doing on AI? Trust is important, and AI is new. One of the things we talk about in the guidelines is taking small iterative steps, going from a prototyping approach. Perhaps you could talk a little bit, just very briefly, about the approach that you've taken to introducing AI into the workflows of Parliament.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the floor. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's important to follow an iterative approach, starting small. For example, it can be useful to start with small projects, some proof of concept, for example, let's say, in a lab-oriented approach. So in my case, for Italian Chamber of Deputies, we decided to follow the following approach. We decided to have weekly meetings with the business colleagues, for example, with the research department, with the committees staff, in order to work together on common topics. And we decided to experiment something. First of all, so we decided to experiment something with chatbots, for example, in order to ask and getting information from our internal databases. So, I mean, it's important the cooperation between IT department and business experts, but also the data management topics are really important, because I think in order to have something good, data need to be structured and documented in order to improve also the quality of final results. And another important point, in my opinion, is that today there is a big hype on generative AI, but in my opinion, it's pretty frequent that parliamentary problems can be solved also by with simple discriminative models, like classification models, regression models. And the point is probably can be useful to avoid to reinvent the wheel, because by using already existing frameworks and the technical solution, it's possible to create proof of concepts and the short solutions in a brief time. And then it's possible to refine the models, to improve the quality, and to make, let's say, structured the final solutions. So this is my opinion. And so, here at Italian Chamber of Deputies, we started small with the small, let's say, projects, proof of concepts. And then some of them became operational in, let's say, we deployed in production environment. And we are still currently experimenting, because every month, every week, there are a newer solution, and it's an ongoing process. I mean, thank you, Andrew.
Grazie, Giovanni. That's a really good answer. And there was a lot packed into that very short space of time. But I think the key there is a thoughtful, slowly build on knowledge, experiment, prototype. We do this cautiously, and I think that's a very good model. Fotis Vassilis from the Hellenic Parliament, so you've got your hand up. Fotis, if you'd like to turn on your camera, you might. I'm sure you want to say something, but you're not getting away too easily, because I'm going to ask you a question. There's a question from the Ivory Coast here, which is a really good one. What strategies do we have in place to encourage and invite parliaments to use AI? So perhaps I'm going to set you up here, because you've really only got a minute. But if you could make your comment and perhaps just briefly reflect on that question as well, I'd really appreciate it.
Andy, thank you very much. The question is really timely, and the strategy, as exactly as it says in the guidelines that you have presented, comes up front. So without a strategy, you go nowhere. And I'm sure there are a lot of parliaments that applied, let's try something and see where it goes. I don't think this is a viable solution. And quite the best possible address to ask if you're a parliament is the Center for Innovation in Parliaments. So how can I build my own strategy? You can have your own experts, for instance, but you should consult with the best possible address, which is the CIP. By the way, the only thing I would like to comment at this point is the following. As Giovanni pointed out, there are some parliaments that are really good. They have the very talented experts, and they can do everything in-house. But eventually, one has to rely on information and expertise outside the parliament, Andy. And one needs to pick the experts that are really good and that are really fitting for the parliamentary use cases. And by the way, kindly comment yourself or the comments and the colleagues that have created these guidelines. What are the next steps? I mean, in a year from now, situation might look like completely different. Is there any plan to move these guidelines forward? Thank you, Andy.
That's a really good question. I mean, yes, I think our view is that this is not a static document. It's a point in time. It's a point in the evolution of AI, and we have more guidelines lined up. The focus for day one has to a large extent been on the very strategic high level. We want to make sure that we're equipping parliaments to think about the strategic issues and the governance issues, and increasingly parliaments will get those sorted. That'll all be clear and that will evolve, and we'll start getting into the more operational and technical issues. So yes, we see a life cycle for the guidelines, if you like, which is rippling down from the top level strategic down through the tactical to the operational. And the use cases, in a way, come up the other way, because when the question comes up of what can we do with AI, the answer lies in some of the use cases that the parliaments that have shared them are developing. Patricia, I'm not going to go to you right now. I'm going to ask Ludovic a question, Ludovic Delepine, if you don't mind, because there's a question from the floor, which is, what's AI going to do for archiving and parliamentary archives? And I think Ludovic is the most qualified person to talk about this. We're going to run short of time if I'm going to get Patricia in at the end. So Ludovic, could I just get a 1-minute answer on what's the future of AI and archives, please?
Sure. Well, archiving is about documents, and today documents about data. So data is at the essence of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence will completely revolutionize the way that we work in the archives, not only for the dissemination, so meaning being able to search into a huge data set of documents, but also being able to process them and digitalize in advance. So today we made huge progresses, for instance, whereas the pre-processing, authorization, post-processing, indexation, all of this is done through generative AI. So there's no need to have this all chained. Just to give you an example, so there's a huge transformation ongoing in the archive domain, and I think that there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to share, and we have already meetings foreseen with the ECPRD, for instance, on this topic, but this is open to be worldwide in cooperation with the Center for Innovation in Parliament.
Wow, that was brief. Well done. Thank you. I was not ready for you to finish then. I was just making a quick note. I should say ECPRD that Ludovic just mentioned there is the European Centre for Parliamentary Research and Documentation, if I remember right. So it's a European-wide network for those that are not in Europe. I'm going to move to some questions now, and I've got a question in the chat, which is going to be for Esteban Sanchez from the Chamber of Deputies of Chile, because it relates to the video that we just saw. And Esteban, the question is, nice systems, they look great, this AI. What was needed time-wise to create and implement this level of AI? What did you have to do? Can you describe the process a little bit for us, please?
En cuanto al proceso que se requiere para desarrollar este tipo de herramientas, se requiere principalmente un enfoque orientado a la innovación. Hay que tener un equipo con un enfoque orientado a implementar nuevas herramientas y nuevos métodos para esta nueva tecnología. En cuanto al proceso y el tiempo, espera un segundito, voy a cambiar mi idioma. ¿Ahí me pueden escuchar bien? Ok. Entonces, como mencionaba, el enfoque que tiene que tener el Parlamento es tener un enfoque orientado a la innovación. Se tienen que ocupar diferentes herramientas, diferentes equipos, no los tradicionales que siguen metodologías tal vez más tradicionales, sistemas de desarrollo de información, sino un enfoque más innovador que tengan la capacidad de experimentar y cometer errores y seguir adelante y seguir cometiendo errores y aprender de esos errores. Ese puede ser un proceso que toma un poco de tiempo, sin embargo, como es un campo en que es relativamente nuevo para los parlamentos, aprender errores es fundamental en estos procesos de implementación. Ahora, como ya existen diferentes herramientas en el área comercial que disponibilizan grandes modelos o herramientas como OpenAI o como Gemini, eso facilita mucho la implementación de equipos de trabajo que tal vez no tienen tanta experiencia en plataformas de IA y pueden usar fácilmente estas herramientas. Así que también es necesario analizar, usar esta herramienta de terceros para poder hacer una implementación rápida y inmediata de estas tecnologías. Chévere.
Thank you, Esteban. That's really good. And actually, if you go to the YouTube channel that we've linked to somewhere in the chat, there's a full-length video from Chile which does explain a lot about the process. I'm going to ask you, if you can, if you're speaking now, to keep your responses to no more than 1 minute, because I want to hear from as many people as possible, and we don't have a lot of time, so we're going to try and be brief. And I'm going to bring in Michael Evre from Canada. Michael, if you're there, I've got an interesting question. This is a tricky one, actually, and I looked at this and thought, oh, how do we answer this one? So I decided you could, because it was beyond my pay grade, I think, this one, which is from Wallace Cheng, which is how do we use AI to debias data? And the key part of this is and improve our outreach to marginal communities. And can you think of any examples of conversations where you might think, how could AI actually help us get through to people that Parliament doesn't talk to?
Well, thank you very much for this question. So this is not an area where we have yet used AI in the Canadian Parliament necessarily from a citizen engagement or outreach perspective. But certainly I think that AI offers capabilities around sentiment analysis that could be used to help us parse our data and better understand it in itself. So I think key here is to understand the transparency in the data. How is data built and how is it accumulated over time? And AI can help us in parsing that information and really generating an indication of how unbiased that might be. I think from an outreach perspective, I think AI can provide some more techniques or to make sure that we're mindful of those that might not be represented in the data itself, and AI can help shine some additional spotlights on where the data may be incomplete. Of course, there's also an accessibility and equity perspective that could be taken into consideration here, and AI could certainly help us ensure that the data collected or the representation of the citizens in our countries is inclusive and reaching out, representing all the marginal communities that we may have. So unfortunately, I don't have any tangible experience on my end to share on that. And maybe one of my colleagues may have some actionable experience or some examples. I know that in the chat, you've shared some use cases related to this as well. But certainly when it comes to this question, my first thought is really using AI to help us understand the biases in the data itself through sentiment analysis.
Thanks, Michael. I think the sentiment analysis is a really good point. And one of the case studies that we have from Brazil is around analyzing qualitative responses to to bills or inquiries. So I think there's an emerging thing there, and I know in the UK Parliament is looking at how it can use AI in a number of areas around that. There's also perhaps another suggestion I can throw in. There's slightly tangential. If you want to reach marginalized people, the way you do it is by being close to them, which is not always you. So thinking about the outreach side of this, maybe AI is the opportunity to free up parliamentary staff from other areas of work so they can focus more on the things that have to be done face to face or hand in hand. So it's an opportunity to rethink the roles that we have in Parliament a little bit. I'm going to pick up another question here, and I'm going to ask Patricia Almeida to answer this one very briefly, which is, we're talking about shared principles. Do you think we should think about a shared idea of what AI output is? So in terms of accuracy, non-partisan, completeness, etc. And should we find a way of being able to capture this in use cases?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, ethical principles, when we designed our guideline, we thought to consider ethical principles a bit more than a list of ethics to be used in an AI policy. We tried to implement, to preview all the processes and practices distributed in all chapters that could materialize in at least one of ethical principles. So we can use practices that were planned for risk management, to analyze, to avoid biases, to avoid problems with privacy. When we deal with AI system development, we also consider ethical principles. We explain deeply how to avoid biases too, but how to monitor many types of monitoring the AI systems after deployment. So as a whole, we tried to make things tangible in all chapters, and it can be used for Gen AI and traditional AI. So the use cases, all of them can be a way can be put in processes for improving what you have already done with use cases towards AI governance. In general, the AI guidelines focus on making your parliament AI readiness, firstly, and secondly, prepared for AI governance. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Patricia. That's a good overview. If you're going to do AI, you can't just do AI. I think is a reasonable statement. There's a lot of things that you need in place to do it effectively. So you obviously need some technology platforms. And as we heard from Esteban, there are actually commercial platforms, third-party platforms that ease your path for that. But if you're building your own applications, you need data, and you need good data, and you need data that you understand. Giovanni Ciccone, I'm going to put you on the spot because you've been building these systems in the Italian Chamber of Deputies. Can you just explain very briefly the sort of preparation that you've had to do to be able to deploy AI systems in the Chamber?
Thanks for giving me the floor. It's very good question. My opinion, data management is one of the most important topics concerning artificial intelligence. And data management is not easy to be addressed because the topic is pretty wide. And the most important thing is to understand which are my information and how I can I structure them? For example, databases or content management systems and so on. Obviously, each parliament can work, let's say, in a proportional way, starting small with, I don't know, with little databases, and databases can grow in the time, let's say. Concerning the quality, is important to avoid inconsistencies and problems in the management. And after that, it's possible to start with a pilot project with the proof of concepts by using, for example, a chatbot, something to query in a natural language processing, by natural language, sorry, query database, and check the quality of the answer. I mean, and in this way, it's possible to refine the model. For example, it's important for discriminative models, the pre-processing step, because for several use cases like classification or clustering, it can be useful to clean the data, to avoid the useless parts of sentences, and so on. The same is for images and videos. So one important skill is to manage data and understand what is useful and what can be avoided to be done. And the approach is very lab-oriented, in my opinion. So IT people should play, let's say, with the data, and experiment by experiment, people of IT can assess the quality and improve the results. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. I think that really emphasizes the importance of getting our data right. Ricardo Villarins, you are nodding away there, and I know you've a lot of experience with working on data in the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies. Can I ask you that question in a slightly different way? How do you prepare users to think about data quality?
Thank you for the question. Hi, everyone. Data governance is a very important theme and subject at this AI journey. And one thing we are really concerned about here in the chamber is to actually prepare all departments to deal with the rules and all the responsibilities regarding data management. And so we are working on building policy on data governance, and working on actually trying to make all departments and areas of the chamber aware of the data they already manage, and how they can actually improve data quality using some practices and procedures to guarantee that the rules that are applied for data processing are actually being applied. So we are working on projects to actually bring this data literacy and the knowledge about all the issues that we have to be worried about in our processes that we work on a daily basis, so that everyone can feel like part of the data governance process, and to, at the end, guarantee that the data quality is in place in order to leverage AI application development and services regarding, for example, all the needs that the departments and processes are wanting to explore with generative AI, for example. And so it's very important in general to make the whole chamber and all the people that is involved with this data management and data governance processes aware of their duties regarding managing their own data.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, we're responsible for our own data. That's a good point to finish on. Michael over there, can I come to you with one last question? Before I do, if anyone has a pressing question, raise your hand because we're going to run out of time soon. But Michael, I've got the $1 million question for you. In Canada, you've been thinking a lot about AI and you've been doing a lot with AI. You're a well-resourced parliament, but what's the one lesson you would share with everybody here?
I think the main lesson is AI is not it's not the goal in itself, right? At the end of the day, AI should be a means to enable strategic alignment with things you're trying to already accomplish in your parliament. So don't do AI in the purpose of doing AI. You're trying to accomplish something aligned with the strategic objectives. And really, AI is kind of a natural step in the digital transformation of your parliament. It's not the first place you should start. You need to build it over time, the data, because you need the data first before the AI can really realize those benefits. And so if you're thinking of it in terms of what's the next cool AI project I can do, that's probably not the best approach to this. When you look at the priorities you have and you try to think about how can AI help me realize those objectives, then you're going to be on the right path for success. Take it one step at a time and go progressively, but I think that's the path forward.
That's an absolutely brilliant answer, Michael. Thank you very much. If I could have scripted it, I would have got you to say that. So that's fantastic. I think that's important. It is just another technology, and it's what it's there for, not the technology itself. Patricia, Almeida, I think it's really good to give you the floor. You've led this project from the start. Could you take a minute to sum up what you think are the key takeaways that people should be hearing from today and how they should use the guidelines?
Thank you, Andy. Well, we don't have a unique recipe for everyone. As Ludovic said, each parliament is different. This is exactly what we had in mind when we designed the AI guidelines for parliaments. We tried to offer you a set of practices and processes in a the most that we could, simple approach in order to make you able to choose the best combination of them. Sometimes you will decide to use one practices in a very deeper approach, others in a superficial approach, but you will decide. And we want to be with you in a journey with a set of guidelines to explore some scenarios and make things tangible, to make your journey, AI journey, simpler and sustainable. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Patricia. I like that finish, simple and sustainable. And this is a journey, and we're all at different stages on that journey, but we can all get on the bus. We can all join in. And I'm going to wrap up now with a couple of comments that I picked up from the chat. And one of them is, how do we ensure quality control and data management after people have already started using AI and we don't have policies in place? That's going to be a reality. That's going to start popping up in the applications people have and people using it. And the answer is you kind of have to retrofit it in. You're going to have to think about this, but you might have to play catch up. technology inevitably runs ahead of regulation, and it can also run ahead of internal procedure. So think about what it says in the guidelines, and there is a guideline on using AI within third-party applications. So have a read of that. And another one from Kim van Duren of the Senate of the Netherlands is an absolutely brilliant one. Does anyone have exit strategies and data portability strategies, or do we risk vendor lock-in? And that's $1 million question. If we don't think about it, yes, we do. So how do we think about the fact that this technology is changing so quickly that the platforms will change as well, and we shouldn't be locked into a single technology? So there's a lot of food for thought in the guidelines. There's a lot of food for thought from today. Thank you so much, everybody, for the discussion. I really encourage you to read the guidelines. You can look at them on the website, and we've made them available to download as a complete set. Same with the use cases. You can search for individual use cases, or you can download the whole set. They're not a text set in stone. They're very much, this is what we think at this point in time, and they're there for you to use and for you to adapt and change, but also to come back with your ideas and suggestions for what else we need, and to help us develop the guidelines further, because the most important thing about this is it's collaborative. And a number of the comments on the chat about how do we share this with different parliaments? Well, that's why we're here. The Centre for Innovation in Parliament is here to help us do that. It's here to bring people together and to share good practice as a community of practice. So you're all invited to be part of that. You're all here today because you're interested. So let's keep in touch. And next year, when we have the webinars as well, we'll make sure you all know about those. But tell us what you want to know as well. So thank you for your time today. Really appreciate all of the contributions from people I put on the spot. Thank you to Patricia and Ludovic for all the work in getting us to this stage. And I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Andy Richardson, who's going to close the event. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to echo what Andy's just said, both the thanks, but also the open invitation to be part of this community, sharing experience as you learn yourselves. I posted a link here to a quick feedback form. It's not so much feedback on this event as an opportunity to say, what are your interests about AI? Would you like to be involved in this work? Would you like to follow more events and contribute? For us at the IPU, this is really what we're about. We're trying to help share experience between parliaments. If your parliament does have use cases, please share them with the wider community. We're going to carry on this work as we've said. We will be announcing a webinar series for 2025 based around these guidelines, maybe taking up the questions that have been raised in the chat, and putting one last link of the day to a first event, which is related to public engagement between parliaments and citizens, and what AI may mean for this. It's an open exploration of that subject. We invite you along. Thank you so much for being here today, everybody. We've been happy to share this moment with you. Have a very good rest of the day, and we look forward to being in touch. Thank you.